Oh, hi there. I'm Ron Juckett, and today we're going to talk about Franchise Hockey Manager 5. No, I'm not going to do any gameplay or show you anything because in most things you can actually watch someone else play a game, and instead you can just kind of listen and put me on your little device and go around and listen to my thoughts on it. It is a hockey sandbox. It's made by the people who make Out of the Park Baseball, which is just about to release their 20th version. My God, I'm old. Of that game. Um, it's a decent game. I bought FHM 3 and hated it. Just couldn't figure it out. Couldn't make heads or tails out of it. At the suggestion of Dave Gardner, it's your fault, man. I bought FHM 5 a couple weeks ago on Steam, paid the full price for it, played around with some historical stuff, played around with some of the modern features, and then just did what I knew I would do, created a fictional league and kind of went from there. Um, and in that aspect, I think FHM 5 is miles ahead of where FHM 3 was. But there are some caveats to that. If you're a player of Out of the Park Baseball series, you know that the strength of the game is not the simulation engine, but the fact that you can be just a general manager. I think the strength of the game is the fictional part of it, or the what if part. It is baseball's ultimate sandbox. If you think you can make the trades to make the Red Sox a dynasty in the 60s, then you can do that. If you can manage around salary caps and keep Bryce Harper happy or whatever, you can manage a modern day team to that, or create the Lords of the Ring League or whatever, and just kind of build from there. Most of my playing, or all of my playing with Out of the Park Baseball, is fictional, has nothing to do with the major leagues. It is trying to build teams and get some history. And I don't think I've ever actually won a championship, or if I did, I came 2 or 3 times. Anyway, but with Out of the Park Baseball, you get your information overload. You know what players do well and what they don't do well. You can get you can get things broken down on a pitch by pitch basis. You know what a batter can do on a 2-2 count or a 3-2 count. Every possible split. It's just frankly too much information. Um, but the strengths of Out of the Park Baseball are that when you go to make a general manager function, you're going to either get a response from the player if you demote them. If you're going to try to make a trade, other teams will tell you what they want and what they want from your team in response to their player. So if you want someone's big old slugger, they'll say, okay, well, we'll take your best pitching prospect, and you can kind of make a determination from there what you want to do. Franchise Hockey Manager series does not give you that kind of feedback, and I think that's one of the big drawbacks. In fact, there's very little feedback for what you do. You can have the computer set up your lines for you and shift around players to play positions and stuff. And it actually, I think, does a very solid job playing a game of hockey. But as far as letting you be the general manager, it really doesn't tell you much of anything. As with everything else, it's based on a 0 to 20 system. You know, what kind of score, is a player an outside scorer, is a player an inside a sniper, how will it do with the net? The intangibles, of course, are all there. Is your player a leader? Is your player good with teams? Is your player good with vets? And so on and so forth. I mean, the details are all there. And if you want historical, you can go back to 1917. Um, but as far as the feedback from what you're doing, it's a little too limited, considering that they're using the same code base and the same base of developers as Out of the Park, which has matured into the game that it is today. You would think that Franchise Manager would be a little further along. For instance, in the team I'm running, the talent drops off. That's the first year of a league, and the talent drops off considerably after the second line. And of course, in modern hockey, you're running 4 lines, 4 forward lines and 3 pair of defense. And trying to either find talent or make trades is nearly impossible because the AI does not tell you what they would like back in return. They'll tell you if it's a good trade or a bad trade. In fact, I haven't actually found a good trade yet, but they're not going back to you and say, look, yeah, you can have Paul Coffey, for example, but I really think that I really want Mike Liut in return. Something to work for there. It doesn't tell you that I want this round draft pick. And so you got to hunt and choose and days. It doesn't really, it gives you a lot of tactics, but doesn't really do a very good job of explaining those tactics to you. Like I said, everything is based on a 0 through 20 system, and you got to figure out for yourself, okay, every player has roles that they can fill, and how well they fill them is based on, like I said, 1 through 20. But there's no continuity to anything. There's no response from the players if you change a role. There's no, hey, I think I play better with player X as opposed to player Y. The way you play the games out is you just kind of watch highlights of the actual game itself. It'll tell you if you slow it down enough about who wins face-off and who makes hits and how shots miss. But the highlight package itself, when it actually shows you some action, isn't very good. You're not sure how long ago you're actually seeing the highlight from. I've had penalties that have popped up 3 or 4 times in the highlights that it kind of gets stuck in there, and you don't know which end of, in any given period, which end of the ice is your end of the ice that you're shooting into and which end that you're defending. Players are graded in game on a 0 to 100 scale in offense and defense, but again, it's not really telling you how it got to those different grades. I think it's a much better step than what it was a couple versions ago, but I think it can do better in some distinct areas because you're not actually, if you play the baseball game, if you play OOTP, you can do a couple options. You can actually play the games out, which I do not do. Or you could read through the box scores and you have enough knowledge of baseball to know that you can look at what your scout says and you can look at what the ratings are and see what players are doing. And of course, over 144 162 game season, you got a pretty good sense of what's going on and what's not. And then you can add the complexity with financials and draft picks and that. In the hockey sim, there doesn't seem to be any inflation or really any adjusting of an era. And so when my team was only putting in an average of 2.5 goals a game, I did not know whether or not I could increase that, if that was a shortage of my talent. I mean, it goes with along with the OTP, and it goes with, on the star system, bad players are less than a star, and your superstars are a 5-star. And I'm not looking for a team worth of superstars, but it's not real intuitive for me on how I should be throwing together these teams. And a look at the forums tells me that not as many people are playing it, and there's just not a lot of questions of how to play. People do what they do with OOTP. They take their favorite team, they try to build out of that and try to go from there. And that's really not my interest in these type of games. I want to take something and build and slap it together and use the commissioner mode and try to get my best past the computer, because the computer, I don't think, is a very trading system, isn't very good in either of those games. Another big difference between OOTP and the franchise hockey manager as far as trades and addressing your talent level is, in OOTP everything's broken down for you, so you know roughly that your catcher in a 2014 league might be 22nd, and that's something you got to upgrade. And when you go to the trade screen, the positions are color coded. If you're gold in something, you're doing great. And if your prospect's color is gold, as far as on the screen, you know that you got something good. And you know that's not something that you either can trade as that from a strength or build onto it, if whatever, to help you make decisions long term. I mean, that's one of the things that OOTP's general manager engine is very good at, is long term thing. Here in the hockey, I don't have that feedback. I know that player A kind of measures with another player A, but there's no, look, here are the best 100 players in the league. How many players do I have on there? Oh, I don't have any. How do I build on there? Well, you do it through the draft and through free agency, just like you normally would. But you don't have a sense of that. Even if you've played everyone else in the league, you really just don't have a sense of how good or how bad your team is. Same with prospects. There's no top 50, top 100 prospects. It's all just kind of lumped in there. The draft pool comes out when you start a season for next year. There's no, here's the top 10 of that. In fact, you can go through and cheat and actually put players on your team now if you wanted to, but that's a little too gamey. Here's a slide over here. So there's none of the things that even in OOTP that tells you what it is you need to improve on. How good are my forwards? Finances don't seem to really matter in franchise hockey manager. If you start off, you're going to be under the salary cap. There's no really ticket prices to change. You get X amount of money. Everyone's arena is really big. Maybe if I played ahead 5 or 10 years, there might be some give and take in how much you can spend. And the spending rules are there. You have a salary cap and a salary floor, but there's no real incentive that you got to save money. If you take a team right out, if you create a fictional league right out of the box and skip the initial draft, you know that you have some dead weight that you need to get rid of. That are gonna be financial trouble to your team. That they're maybe there for 1 or 2 years. They're veterans and they're hanging on for dear life, and they're getting paid way too much money. Here, there really isn't that kind of depth to that. You can go, okay, unless you go real player. But again, the whole mantra of this type of games is that you're not actually playing a John Tavares or Carey Price or Bobby Orr. You're playing representations of them, of what the computer interprets them to being. And so, especially if you do a long-term historical league, players might not, Bernie Perrant may not develop into Bernie Perrant, and someone like a Lyndon Vyers might turn into a decent player over a long period of time. I mean, that's the beauty of doing it. It's a sandbox type game. I'm enjoying the games that the game that I have. I'm not saying that, but as far as interaction with the players and what you should do as a GM, I mean, it's not presenting that information to you as well as OOTP does. And OOTP frustrates me in a lot of different ways. I don't feel frustrated with Franchise Hockey Manager 5. Like I said, I think it's come a long way from the third version, but it feels like, especially since it's in the same development community and team as who's working on the baseball game, or at least share ideas, that it should be a bit more mature. Yes, 19 versions as opposed to 5. But in this day and age, when you come out, you should know that you should be able to do A, B, and C. I mean, the granddaddy of all of these general manager simulations, of course, is soccer's Football Manager, which I believe is now in its 20th or 21st or 22nd version. And that will just drive you to drink, because you got to know the tactics and you got to wipe players' butts and all that sort of thing. I mean, that's the ultimate. That actually feels like a job. I think that kind of goes too far. And OOTP can feel like a job too. You can go too far. But this doesn't feel complex enough. It's more like tying a blindfold around yourself and hoping things go okay. But as I said, I think it's a step up in the series. It has the official NHL license. I don't regret buying it. I wouldn't return it. But I hope in future versions they kind of work on, just tell me how my team compares to the rest of the league. I mean, one of the things that both the baseball game and the hockey game have are scouts and coaches that are good or bad. And that's fine, because that kind of mimics to a thing. I don't want to have human frailties in my coaches, and that I'm the human frailty. I'm the weakness, trying to figure out how to put this together. If you put a double fog of war on there, it just makes it harder for me to enjoy it, because I don't know. You need feedback from your decisions, good and or bad. If they're winning, obviously players are going to be happy, but I'm not sure how I'm winning. And I'm not sure that the tactical things that I'm doing in game are making a difference. If you, let's say, played a driving game, a serious driving simulation like iRacing or Assetto Corsa, and you have the wheel and the pedals, you get the force feedback from the wheel. You know what you're doing to that car. With this game, I really have no feeling of whether or not of what if I'm dressing the best people, if I'm scratching the worst people. It's much more of a gut feel, and the game doesn't really give you that much of a response. If you have to have a player that comes back to tell me they're unhappy, and you can be a center and then get time in at one of the wings, okay, and so is now happy, feels more comfortable as playing as a right wing, and he was a left wing. Okay, so I've got an overload of right wings compared to left wingers, but there's nobody saying, damn it, I'm a left winger. I want to play left wing. The only kind of pushback I've gotten in the hours I've played so far is in the beginning when you change someone's uniform number. So and so wants number 14. Well, the 10-year vet that scored 500 goals wears 14. Guess what, kiddo? You're not wearing number 14. And sometimes they're happy with it, and sometimes they're distressed. It's an odd thing to, but that's really it. So, I think as with any game, it's a work in progress. I guess I'm a touch disappointed something that they know from the experience of the baseball game, and anyone who could look at even Motorsport Manager, which I've not played yet, but there are good videos on that can look and say, look, yes, your decision made this better or not better. I wish there was more of a tactile feel to it. But beyond that, it feels like you're actually, coaching a hockey team to an extent. But as far as the GM things are there, which is what attracts me to those games. And yes, I am attracted to the GM part of Out of the Park Baseball. It's lacking that, and I think if the series can go forward and address some of those needs, I think they got a winner, because I think they've addressed some of the historical crap from before. All right, that'll do it. I'm Ron Shuckett. Hit that like and subscribe, and if I'm off base on anything, leave it in the comments. I want to know what I'm doing wrong. I mean, that's the reason why we produce these videos. And so hit that like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you the next time.